All right. Hey, I'm Kimberly Dark, and here we are at the Hope Desk. It's my pleasure to answer some questions that folks ask regarding social interactions and how we might have, I'm interested in how we might have more meaningful civil discussions about difficult topics. I don't have all the answers for sure. I don't have the only right answers, but I will spend some time with you answering two questions that come from you via social media or email or however it is that you reach me. I think that it is hopeful for more people to be able to join public discourse, and ideally, then that helps to influence the lives that we have. I'm not going to offer you in depth scholarship on these topics. A lot of times, other people are better equipped for that than I am, but I do bring a sociological perspective, and I always offer you a couple of articles about the things we're discussing. So I feel like we're not going to spend a whole lot of time today. I mean, I always allocate up to an hour for this time together, but these two questions have deceptively simple answers, in my opinion. So one of them is it possible to end sexism and LGBTQ discrimination in places like the military or fire department that have histories of excluding women entirely? This is a really great question. And let me just remind you that the entire United States and most countries have a history of excluding women entirely. And we could also talk about that in terms of, other marginalized groups as well. So it's not, it's like, it's kind of like the question is really around this issue of wow, in military and paramilitary organizations, that history of sexism or racism, it's like it's palpable. And in many cases, it's still written into kind of rules, right? Like when we talk about body diversity, for instance, I recently was preparing a talk for a campus, and they're like, yeah, so, body size diversity is still a thing that people receive discrimination on. And what do you know? It turns out this was a military academy, and they literally have height and weight requirements for students to be able to participate. So that's not true at most kind of state universities, but is it still salient? Yes, it is. You still would have a different experience at that educational institution, even though height weight discrimination is hidden beneath a veneer of free will and personal choice, that everybody gets to act the way they act. So, the quick answer to this question, is it possible to end sexism and LGBTQ discrimination in places like the military or fire department? The answer is yes, it's possible to do that anywhere because humans are creating human culture. There is no other force that is creating human culture other than humans. And also, there is a gift in the fact that at least expressions of that discrimination are still overt. They are not, again, concealed by this veneer of niceness. I don't know if you've ever heard anybody talk about like the difference between a Southern racist and a California racist, right? Like I grew up in California, and it astonished me when I first started traveling around the United States. And it was like, oh my gosh, the whole country is so racist in a way that I didn't understand. And then I was like, hang on a minute though, we still behave in the same way in California. It's just not okay to talk about it in public. But definitely, still, people talk about it in private and behave in racist or sexist ways. So I think there is some gift in an agenda being overt rather than covert, because it means it's easier to fight against. People are not as likely to deny that any wrong is being done. And that's kind of a great place to start from. Here's the tricky part though, changes have to be ideological, not just band-aid approaches, right? So changes need to be ideological and include reparations and transformations in which people really discuss how discrimination reflects a view that some people are actually of lesser humanity, lesser skill, etc. So, like, think this through for a moment. We just think about like the end of chattel slavery in the United States, for instance. That was done by legal mandate, right? And there were people all over who were white people all over who were enslaving Black people because they literally thought that they possessed less humanity. They were animals, right? And in the same way that you can hold animals in captivity and use their labor, this is how people believed about humans. You don't just pop out of that viewpoint. You know, imagine if somebody came to you today with an edict that said, sorry, you have to free the family dog because because that animal is being kept in captivity and it's a sentient creature. And no, you would be like, well, probably first of all, you would be like, but Lucky wants to be with me. I mean, that probably would be your first thought. But the point is, ideological shifts don't happen fast. They generally happen with time and contact, with actually being able to hear from the people affected how they have been affected. But if you don't even see those people as human, why the devil would you be listening to them? Why would you give their stories any credibility? So I think we have to remember that this is the situation that we are coming from. And in really, really recently, like actually within our lifetimes when it comes to certain institutions. So we have to change ideology, not just, do token things. Like, for instance, right? Summer of 2020 had an amazing effect on people's ability to speak up about white supremacy. But painting the words Black Lives Matter on a street in DC is symbolic because the police are still brutalizing Black people on that street. So there's got to be a way to shift ideology as well. So we don't want just more California racism. We need an actual shift in the way this has happened. So, I normally give you an article to discuss this sort of thing. My book, Damaged Like Me, the introduction to that book actually handles this pretty well, I think, with regard to mental frameworks and pre-existing ideologies. And so Emily can provide a link for you to, this is just a link to the Amazon page where they give you a look inside of the book. Obviously, I hope that you have the book, and if you already have it, just open it up and read the introduction, and then you'll be able to see about that. So one of the examples that I use in that introduction talks about how we hold mental frameworks. So I'm going to use the example of the fire department. Like when you think about a firefighter doing a firefighter's job, chances are you are picturing the certain hat that the person wears. You're picturing a certain uniform. Chances are you're picturing a big, strong man, and there's a flaming building behind him, and he is carrying out either a petite woman or a child, or maybe a pet, out of that burning building. So this is an ideological image that we hold, despite the fact that, think this through for a moment, when it comes to, well, I don't know, when it comes to rescuing people from a burning building, for instance, it might be handy to have size diversity among the people on your, your workforce, right? It might be handy to have somebody who can maneuver into tight corners. It might extra much be handy to have good equipment so that you're not relying on human brawn in order to, do every possible thing. Another thing that this image we have obscures is that, you know what, in the US, firefighters are part of a emergency response team that normally is responding to medical issues, not fires. Fires are actually a very small percentage of what firefighters do. And so, but it's not sexy somehow, is it, to think of, um, somebody responding to a heart attack, even though that really is far more likely to be happening. So we have to somehow disturb ideological frameworks, mental frameworks that don't reflect what is actually happening. And this is especially true when it comes to things like sexism. Because for sure, things like military, fire departments, all of these are still employing fewer women, like women in extremely small numbers. You know. Does anybody want to say anything about this before I move on to the other topic?
Nothing from me.
All right. Of course, you can ask things later as well. The other question that I'm addressing this week is related to the first. Isn't that cool? Why is it so much easier to see sexism and other discrimination somewhere else, like in the morality police in Iran, but not in one's own culture, like forced pregnancy in the United States? Oh, this is such a good topic. And it's a question we all need to be asking ourselves. And I really would like you to read Mona Altahawe's work. She is an Egyptian American journalist and author. And I'm offering you an essay from her that is specifically written to white women who are cheering Iranian women from afar right now. And Emily will share that in the chat. Elta Howe specifically asks you, if you are a white woman in America, what will you burn down? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right? Because the point she makes is that fascist regimes don't happen in a day. And the overturn of Roe v. Wade in the United States was a huge win, she says, for the white Christian theocratic revolution. And so, what will you do? All right. So let me get to answering this question about why it is so much easier to see sexism and other discrimination somewhere else. One way we could talk about that is that there is a form of confirmation bias at play. And let me just remind you that bias is a normal way that our brains work in order to group information so that you don't have to cognitively decide that every tall, barky thing with leaves is a tree. Like, it's a good thing to have stereotypes and bias be part of our mental functioning. It is not a good thing when we apply stereotypes and bias to social situations without consciousness. That's not a good thing. So, so this is a form of confirmation bias that works, that sexism looks a certain way. And if it doesn't look like that, it's not sexism, right? And we really have in the United States this thing about freedom to dress as you want is the biggest litmus for is it sexism? Which is ironic when you think about how girls are still constrained by dress codes that boys are not constrained by. Like we learn this from the moment we are children in school. So we do actually have clothing based discrimination as well. But we also have other forms that we have rendered invisible because they are so common to us. That's really what's happening here. So there's no doubt that it is dramatic and horrible for a woman to be told she is not wearing her head covering correctly and then murdered. That's horrible and definitely a dramatic form of discrimination. But other forms that are subtler should be visible to us as well. The other thing that happens here is that looking outside of our own culture allows us to other people who don't look and behave as we do, people of different religions, right? And this is, remember, this is a favorite US pastime. Outrage at foreigners, outrage at foreign ways of living is a favorite US pastime. Even though this can even happen in the United States. In the United States. So, for example, here's another example of confirmation bias. Exceptional stories, such as, hey, there was a Black president, like literally one in the history of the nation, right? But an exceptional story like a Black president can make it seem like Black people are in leadership roles everywhere. Like our minds take that in, normalize it, and then start looking for examples of it. Those examples might even be in film or on television, not actually in real life, and we still take them on as examples that Black people are in leadership roles everywhere. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but there's this weird trend in like serial television shows that there is like a super higher percentage of Black women as judges in courtrooms than there ever has been in real life in the United States. But our minds take this in. Now, here's the tricky part. We want representation like that in shows because our minds also take that in as possibility. The little Black girl who wants to study law and become a judge sees that positively. So we want that. But we also don't want the mind to use that as an example that, oh, Black people are making decisions about our lives everywhere. So confirmation bias is another reason that we find it easier to normalize certain forms of sexism to the point where we don't even see them and then focus on other types as well. It also gives us a feeling of simultaneous progress and outrage. So if somebody says, but we have to work to end sexism, you can say, yes, yes, we do, we totally do. But at least it's not like over in that country, or at least it's not like when my grandmother couldn't vote, or at least it's not like, you know. So this becomes a way to insulate the sexism that we currently face, insulate it from scrutiny, while still acknowledging that it exists. So we're tricky. We're tricky. Our minds are tricky. And the way that we come to normalize difficult circumstances, tricky business. Is there anybody who has questions or comments about these very things?
I'm not seeing anything.
All right. As I mentioned, I really think that the answers to these questions are deceptively simple, and they require consciousness. And I hope you read the Mona Eltahawy article because they do require action as well. And I don't think it's hopeless at all. Again, humans, we are what makes culture. So are these topics that either you have been talking about already, or that you, because certainly the uprisings in Iran have been in the news. Have you been talking about these things, or might you talk about either of these things soon?
I'll say I haven't really been talking to anyone about much of anything
Okay, fair enough.
beyond the nose and that's attached to my face. Uh, but I went to temple last week for Rosh Hashanah, and the rabbi went off on the United States of America in a way that was amazing, inspiring, and made me very happy to be a part of that particular marginalized group in America. Yeah, to know that like my religious denomination of Reform Judaism is like doing good work and
Yeah.
not afraid to call out the Christo-fascist direction that the United States is moving towards.
Yeah.
And
That's great.
it makes me feel like that it's actually important for me to like go be Jewish in public, you know?
That's a great thing to notice.
Yeah.
Yay for being Jewish in public.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Like I can sit here and just be alone and but yeah, I mean it's intense. You go and there's like fucking cop cars outside. Like high holiday services post 9/11 is like you have to we have a membership badge that we have to wear, like you can't just go to temple, you have to pass through layers of security, et cetera, et cetera. So
That's a sad,
yeah.
sad testament.
And like I actually don't think that your average American, not that anyone on this call is average, but I don't think that people know this. Like this is a reality of being a Jew in America in whatever era we're in, late stage capitalism. Yeah.
I
It's
believe
like
it's
come
20,
in and pray. Say it again, Kimberly. Sorry.
I believe it's 2022, but yeah.
Yes. As I recently wrote in something in the year of someone else's Lord, 2022. Okay. Jewish person, thank you for listening. Sorry, this Jewish person says to you, thank you for listening.
Got it. Nancy, were you going to comment?
Or just how we talk about sexism every day. I have a private practice in counseling, and to be honest, since the pandemic, most of the people I interact with are my clients. I don't really talk to other people very much, but it comes up in sessions on a regular basis. I was just talking with somebody today about how men and women react to certain kind of conflicts differently because little boys are taught that it's okay to be angry but not to be scared or sad, and little girls are taught it's okay to be scared and sad but not angry.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's like that kind of understanding sexism in the culture is something that at least for me comes up pretty frequently.
That is another really powerful aspect of both of these topics that we're discussing, here to reflect on and to discuss with others is what is normalized as gendered communication when actually all of those emotions and traits are human traits. Of course they are. And we can know that as soon as we really think it through. But again, we have so normalized the division between things like being sad or fearful or angry. We've so separated those things that it seems normal when we see it that way. Well, as usual, I appreciate you all, and I want to remind you, for November there will be no Hope Desk because I am going to a writing residency, and I will be in the Santa Cruz Mountains, at Jurassic, in being treated to a lovely time away to finish up a novel, I hope.
Wow.
We'll be back in December though. Thanks so much
Wow.
for coming.
All right. Bye everyone.
Thank you.